Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Oh, good morning.
I'm Hanifa Maswali,
And I'm Jaden Diarco.
and we'd like to welcome and thank you for joining us in this year's celebration of Black History Month. We would like to give a huge thank you to all the staff at Lynn Classical, including but not exclusive to Ms. Fincerelli, Mr. Johnson, Dr. Johnson, Ms. Dunn, and especially Mr. Washington. We would also like to give a huge shout out to all the speakers and acts that have taken a lot of time out of their busy schedules in order to prepare for this assembly.
And as a reminder, a very earnest effort was put into this assembly by both all of our speakers and those performing. So naturally, we do ask that you please take this time to please silence all your electronic devices that may disturb other members of the audience. Thank you. And now, with that out of the way, we'd like to warmly invite you to direct your attention to this year's 2020 Black History Month Assembly. We do duly hope that you have a lot to gain from this program. And next, we'd like to invite our Senior Class President, Balaji, to introduce the first speaker to follow. Thank you.
So I guess this doesn't come off then. So, thank you. So I'm here to introduce the first guest speaker tonight, but I take pride in being African American. So I'm gonna let you guys know what, Black History Month is to me. The fact that through everything that African Americans have endured in this country, going against a system that was, created against us, it's really good, and it makes me feel like I'm shaking right now that we have a month just to dedicate to us. Not me, but our ancestors have came a long way for society to finally realize that African Americans and all people, but for this month, African Americans, are very important in how society is now. Even though we got the shortest month of the year, and I'm not gonna complain, but as long as we're being recognized, it means everything to me. And there's a misconception that it's only like black celebrities and people, back then that should be recognized, but no, there's people in this city that should be recognized for Black History Month. Black cops should be recognized, black teachers should be recognized, black doctors. All of them have an impact of how society is today. So that brings me in to, introduce Mr. Murkison. Mr. Murkison is part of the NAACP, and he's worked actively to, implement change in young black men's lives, sending them to college, working with programs, and there's not a lot of people doing that. So if you can please give a warm welcome to Mr. Murkison.
Good morning. Can everybody hear me on the mic? Okay. I'd just like to start out by saying thank you to Principal Dunn and Mr. Washington for inviting me here this morning. I think that Black History Month is a very valuable tool and asset for each and every one of us. A lot of people think it's just for black people, but it's not. And I'll get into that a little bit later on. But I'd just like to start just my presentation with, I'd like to start with a poem, and I'd like to end it with a poem. I think that will probably set the tone for some of the things I'm going to say as we move on. The first poem I'd like to read to you is by the great Langston Hughes. It's called An American Beast of Burden. I, too, sing America. I am the darker brother. They send me to eat in the kitchen when company comes. But I laugh. I eat well and grow strong. Tomorrow, I'll eat in the kitchen at the table when company comes. They wouldn't dare to say to me, eat in the kitchen then. Besides, they'll be ashamed and see how beneficial I am. I, too, am America. American Beast of Burden by Langston Hughes. I'm going to give you a little bit of a chronology. I'm going to kind of speak quickly on some things. I'm not going to dwell on them, but it's going to give you like a roadmap and a chronology of how African Americans have come to this country and what they had to endure. But first, I'd just like to say, why is Black History Month important? Black History Month is important because in 1926, Dr. Carter G. Woodson, the founder of Black History Month, thought it was important that not only black people, but white people as well, know of all the accomplishments that black people have contributed to this society. Because a lot of times you might know that in a society, in any type of group collectively, and people are supposed to work together, people like to think that things are distributed equally, that the workload is distributed equally. Now, if one group thinks that they've done everything, and another group hasn't contributed to anything else, that automatically makes them think that the other group is taking advantage of them, that they're less than. So it creates an environment of superiority. So again, Dr. Carter G. Woodson wanted to let people know the importance of all the accomplishments that African American people have done. The accomplishments of African American people are not just small things. They range from things that are very small to things that are very large. But when people, let me run this back for a second. Okay. They range from things that are very large to very small. But when white people, again, think that they've created everything, and you have black people here and they don't even know what they've created, automatically, again, it creates that atmosphere of inferiority and superiority. In the history of people itself, history itself, you have to understand, is written by people who are considered the victors or the winners. Now, I'm not sure exactly what you've been taught in your history classes, but just say in 1941, start of World War II. The United States and the Allies are fighting against the Axis powers in World War II, the Germans and the Japanese, the Italians. Fortunately for us, the United States won that war. Yes. Fortunately for us, they won that war. But just imagine if they had not. Right now, we tell the story. We were the victors, the Allies. We talk about how the Germans systematically murdered over 6 million Jews. How the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, but how somehow we emerged victorious and we were able to overcome that. Now, if that story's flipped, and imagine if the Germans had won that war and the Japanese had won that war, they'd be telling a different story. They'd be telling you right now, and even there's people right now today that will tell you that the Holocaust never happened. That the Jews were an inferior race. They also tell you, the Japanese will tell you how the United States bombed Nagasaki and Hiroshima and killed nearly 250,000 Japanese people, and how they arose victorious. Again, the winners tell the story. The winners rewrite history. So the history of America starts in the 1400s when slave ships were taken from Africa by the Portuguese. The first slave ships landed in Jamestown, Virginia in 1619. African Americans were worked in the fields with cash crops like cotton, tobacco, sugarcane, all throughout the Americas, not just in North America, but in South America as well. As a matter of fact, there were more slaves taken to South America and Brazil than was taken to North America. That's why if you go down to Brazil today, you'll see people that look just like me. They range through all the colors of the rainbow. But that is a direct result of the African diaspora, the spread of African people all around the world. In the 1700s, during colonial America, we had some of our founding fathers. Some of our great statesmen also held slaves. The father of our country, George Washington, held slaves. Thomas Jefferson held slaves. And then we go into the 1800s. The late 1800s, after the Civil War, 1861 to 1865, the great emancipator, Abraham Lincoln. We were taught that Abraham Lincoln, the great emancipator, freed the slaves because of his compassion. And he didn't think slavery was right. He thought it was wrong. But I'd have to say that's a half-truth. Again, I'm not sure what you've been taught in your history classes. But as you go out and you further your education, you'll find you look a little bit deeper. Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves to save the Union. Through his own statements, he said, whatever it takes to save the Union, preserve it, I will preserve it. If I have to keep slaves to preserve the Union, I will keep slaves. If I have to free the slaves to preserve the Union, I will free slaves. So it's a half-truth. Did he free the slaves? Yes, he did. But not simply because he was this compassionate human being and he thought that slavery was wrong. That is one of those things that have been dogging America for many years. And we tried to move beyond it. Now we move into the 19th century, the 1900s, the 20th century. At the turn of the century, there were black intellectuals like W.E.B. Du Bois, who started the NAACP. Then you move into the early 1920s and 30s. There was a time called the Harlem Renaissance, when black people were, excelling in music, art, drama, literature, all type of inventions during this time. You had people like not only W.E.B. Du Bois, but you had the great Langston Hughes as a poet. You had Zora Neale Hurston, who's a poet. You had people like Fats Waller, an entertainer. You had Duke Ellington, and also another entertainer, moving through that time. And during the 40s, 1940s, you're moving to an age what they call the Great Migration, where many African Americans moved from the South up to the North in the West. They moved to St. Louis, Chicago, Cleveland, Detroit, Los Angeles, Boston, Washington, D.C., and New York. They were escaping the agricultural South to the industrial North. I'm just going to backtrack just for a second because I think it's very important. In the mid-1800s, moving into the 1900s, you may have heard of the Industrial Revolution. During the Industrial Revolution, there was a man by the name of Jan E. Matzeliger. He invented something called the shoe lasting machine that helped spark the Industrial Revolution. And he did that right here in Lynn, Massachusetts. That's why I went back to it. He did it right here in Lynn. That sparked the Industrial Revolution that made Lynn the shoemaking capital of the world. Not just in the North Shore, not of Massachusetts, not of New England, not of the United States, but the shoemaking capital of the world. That's why some of you might even remember and know and may have even heard, they call Lynn Shoe City. That's why they call Lynn Shoe City. An African-American man, Jan E. Matzeliger, sparked the Industrial Revolution. And moving into the 1950s and 60s, we had the Civil Rights Movement, where black students and white students all over the South and in the North were banding together against all the inequities that black people had to face, the simple things called that you may have maybe going to school together. I sit out here and I see a rainbow of people, and I would imagine that your academic careers and your involvement with your classmates have been positive ones. Maybe not all of them have been positive, most of them have been, I would imagine. And you like some of your classmates, and hopefully they like you. But you would not even had that opportunity back in the 1960s. It was something called Jim Crow laws and segregation that prevented students from even going to school together and learning from one another. And that's one thing that Black History Month moves to foster, and was to make each and every one of us recognize and understand the accomplishments and also the cultural differences that each of us has and how we can learn from one another. That's why it's important that black people know about white people know about Asian people know about Hispanic people, and Native people as well. because we've all had a cross to bear. But at the same time, you're dealing with a system that have kept us apart and try to perpetuate this lie that one group is greater than the other. And we're trying to dispel that. Again, moving forward, in the 1960s, during the sit-ins, there were white students and black students down there sitting at lunch counters, letting people know that we're just human beings, to fight for the most fundamental of rights, to even go to a restroom. People didn't think that another person was good enough to even go to the same restroom as them. They didn't think that people were good enough to go to the same movie theater as them. They didn't think people were good enough to even drink out of the same water fountain as them. And something I really think is really crazy that you really don't hear mentioned a lot, but I know this to be true, and I know it for myself. Although I grew up right here in Lynn, I went to Lynn Classical High School just like you did, all right, so I owe my education to them. My family's from Birmingham, Alabama. And trips south, when we go back down south to visit, you know, for good things and bad things, sometimes we would go down for a funeral. And I remember going to a funeral for my uncle. We went to the funeral, and after we went to the cemetery, it was a black-only cemetery. Not because they wanted to be segregated, but it was segregated by white segregationists. You could not even be buried in the same cemetery as a white person. All those things were going on. But again, the way to bring about the change that I think that we've had today is to give people information and let them know and understand the differences are important, but they're also valuable. You can learn from other people. So with Black History Month, I implore each and every one of you to reach out to some of your classmates and embrace some of the different cultures that you might see around you and realize the value that they have. I'm going to leave you with a couple of examples of accomplishments by African American people, inventors. This person is called the father of the blood bank. You may or may not have heard of him. His name is Dr. Charles Richard Drew. Back in the 1940s, he developed a technique of separating red blood cells from white blood cells and freezing the plasma. And he created the blood bank that saved many, many lives that we use today. Anyone that's been involved in a blood bank, again, when I was back in school, we used to have blood drives in school. You would give blood to the Red Cross, and that would help people if they ever got into an accident, you, I, anybody else. You could take blood and could save somebody's life because you and other people are willing to give. And Dr. Drew was willing to develop that technique that made that possible, Dr. Charles Richard Drew. Another person I'd like to tell you about is Dr. Daniel Hale Williams. Dr. Daniel Hale Williams, back in 1810, he was the first surgeon to do a successful heart surgery on a human being. There had been heart surgeries done before, but just on animals. But he was the first one to do it on human beings. Benjamin Banneker, a scientist, an astronomer, an engineer, an architect. Back when Washington, D.C. was being laid out and planned, our nation's capital, the United States had commissioned an architect from France to do this. They had some sort of disagreement, they fell out, and the architect from France just upped and left, took all his plans and left, and they had to start all over again. But Benjamin Banneker, who was also working with that French architect, had committed the entire plans and blueprints to memory. And he laid out Washington, D.C., the entire plans of it by memory. Benjamin Banneker. He's a scientist, an astronomer, and an African American. Elijah McCoy. You may have heard this term, I want the real McCoy, the real McCoy. That was because of Elijah McCoy. He's the inventor of the drip cup, a drip cup and the Yankee coupler. Those are things that, the Yankee coupler was a device that enabled trains to be connected. It would come together like this, and they'd have a line of trains together. Also, the drip cup was for manufacturing machinery, so it would keep to be lubricated. And I'm gonna read you another poem at this time. I'm going to just tie this up a little bit. I know my time is short. For this poem, I have to go to a book for this one. I don't remember this one by heart. This poem is by the great Maya Angelou. And I think it's appropriate. It is called Still I Rise. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust I rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? 'Cause I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room. Just like moons and like suns, with the certainty of tides, just like hopes springing high, still I rise. Did you want to see me broken, bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by soulful cries? Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard? 'Cause I laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my own backyard. You may shoot me with your words. You may cut me with your eyes. You may kill me with your hatefulness, but still like air I rise. Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the huts of history's shame I rise. Up from past that's rooted in pain I rise. I'm a black ocean leaping and wide, welling and swelling I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. Maya Angelou. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murkison, for your very, very, very kind words. I would like now to call up school committee member Mr. Satterwhite, please.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Michael Satterwhite. I am currently on the school committee. I'm also a lawyer in the community. I've known Darryl for a long, long time, but I just wanted to say a few words before I just acknowledge Darryl Murkison for everything that he does for our city and for our youth. Darryl had made some great points about Black history and how important it is to everyone, not just people of color, but whites and every race. When it comes down to it, we have a history, and Lynn's history, unfortunately, is that even in 1987, which was not too long ago, desegregation was still an issue in our schools. That's part of Lynn history. Today, we have a Black superintendent. As you can see, things can change drastically over a short period of time. And that happens when people build relationships with people that don't look like them. And that seemed to be the solution, and if you look at it today, that's still the solution for a lot of our issues. We have to get rid of our fear for the unknown or for who don't look like us. And it's important, and again, like I said, it didn't happen overnight. It took years of hard work from people that are known and unknown here in our city. But again, those relationships are extremely important. I had a conversation with Daryl beforehand, just about culture in our city and just the history. And one of the things that, you know, I'm proud of is that my grandma and my granddaddy lived by and taught us that everybody has value. Everybody has value. Every one of you sitting in these chairs right now, whether you speak Spanish, English, another language, whether you came from another country, whether you were born here, you all have value. And if my grandparents witnessed me or any of my cousins or my uncles or aunts not following that rule, you got smacked real quick. So I just understand that everyone has value. And you have to keep that in mind when dealing with people, that we all have value and something to offer. And one of the things that, you know, I talk to people when they come to me and they have issues and they're, you know, I have an issue with this person, you know, they're saying these things about me and you know, it's definitely hurting me and I'm feeling depressed or something like that. And I'll always say to them, do you think that person's thinking of you right now after they said that nasty thing about you? Probably not. They moved on. So don't allow them to take away the value that you have inside. And that's extremely important to remember when you're dealing with people. But just speaking about our city and how far we've come, and we still have a long way to go, I just wanted it to get personal with me. My life would be different had it not been for the people before me. I'm the 4th elected black official in the city of Lynn, and we were settled in the 1600s. If that doesn't say much to you guys, then you need to reflect. The 4th black elected official. And there's me and Buzzy Barton that's currently the only 2 black elected officials in the city. Black history is still making history in our city, and you see it every day. You might not be looking at the paper or reading the paper or speaking about it, but we have our first black fire chief in the history of our city, Steve Archer. Wonderful man. We have our first black special education director in the city's history. And again, we have our first black superintendent, Patrick Tutwiler, who's doing a tremendous job. And again, speaking to someone that might not look like you, might not act like you, is not a bad thing. It opens up your horizon. It actually makes you a little bit better of a person because you're able to see the point of view from somebody else. And I think that that's the biggest challenge we have in our current society. So black history is everyone's history, so be proud of it. And I appreciate you coming to the assembly and hearing Daryl Murkison, again, who is a tremendous person who gives back to the city over and over again and is such an asset to what makes Lynn so special. So I want to give this gift on behalf of the school to Mr. Murkison. And this is an official citation from the mayor, Thomas McGee, that just says, the official citation of the mayor's office, be it known that the mayor, Thomas M. McGee, hereby extends his most sincere congratulations and his great appreciation to Daryl Murkison in the recognition of your unwavering commitment and support of the Meals to College program at Lynn Classical, and be it further known that the entire city of Lynn extends its best wishes for continued success, great joy, and happiness. Congratulations.
I just want to say very quickly, again, I'm humbled by this and I really appreciate it. I wasn't expecting this at all. Usually, if I just speak with young people around the city or anywhere I go, I'm not expecting anything back from them. I think that the message that I'm trying to send out is payment enough for me. That's a reward. So again, thank you, Mike Satterwhite, Lynn Classical, student body, and faculty. I appreciate everything. And let me leave you with this one thing. As was stated earlier, I'm down at the Community Minority Cultural Center at 298 Union Street. We've had events for Black History Month all week long. And tonight at 7 o'clock, we're showing a film down there called Hidden Colors. It tells you about all the accomplishments of black people around the world from a global perspective. So if you're willing to come down at 7 o'clock, we'll be there, and I think it'll be worth your while. Thank you.
Gospel music has been an integral part of African American culture for generations. While traveling through the Middle Passage, the forcible transportation of millions of Africans across the Atlantic, many had preserved their culture by means of music. This came to influence many genres of music, such as R&B, jazz, and gospel. On that note, I'd like to welcome Lynn Classical's very own Rival Rams dance group performing Take Me to the King.
Take me to the King. I don't have much to bring. My heart is torn in pieces. It's my offering. Take me to the King. Truth is, I'm tired. Options are few. I'm trying to pray, but where are you? I'm all churched out, hurt and abused. I can't fake what's left to do. Come on. Truth is, I'm weak. No strength to fight, no tears to cry, even if I tried. But still my soul refuses to die.
Gospel music has been an important genre in the rich tradition of African American music for almost 400 years. It has inspired many popular musicians of the 20th century, including Aretha Franklin, Whitney Houston, and John Legend. The gospel song Praise His Holy Name features a repeated chorus with contrasting verses accompanied by piano and percussion. Although the students of concert choir come from a variety of religious beliefs and cultural backgrounds, we have enjoyed preparing the music and hope to honor this important tradition in our performance today. Thank you.
Thank you. Once again, that was wonderful. That was wonderful. Let's give another round of applause. Thank you. Excellent. Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, now moving forward, we'd like to introduce our next speaker, our very own Lynn Classical High School's Joseph Sevier, who will be delivering his talk entitled, "What is Heroism?" Joseph?
Each of us has the right to judge the character of a person by examining their words and actions. Most of us perceive a hero as selfless, someone who prioritizes a person's needs over their own. The word heroism comes from the Greek word heronos, referring to someone who exemplifies boldness and valor. In addition to these ideals, a hero must embody the people's values and be accountable for their words and actions. Once the people's trust is gained, a hero influences them. If you're not honest, then that trust is no more. So in the eyes of the people, a hero has to stay consistent with their words and actions, which correspond with their value systems. Let's consider an important case of this point. According to the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, the Nazi political party used propaganda to deceive the international and German public. The Nazis wanted Germany to be seen as a victim of Allied and Jewish aggression in order to hide the true psychological goals and justify war and terror against innocent civilians. Hitler's party was promising the German public economic freedom to strengthen the country. To accomplish his goals, he gradually manipulated the citizens to change their beliefs towards Jews. Hitler programmed citizens to believe Jews were inferior to the German Aryan race and a burden to Germany's economic problems. At a certain point, Hitler was seen as a national hero by leading gun battles against police and annexing countries. However, towards the end of the Second World War, the citizens of Germany realized that their leader has led their country astray, and Hitler's actions brought him to his demise. When we acknowledge that someone's actions are selfless and don't involve anyone getting hurt, we as a society can agree that they're heroic. Heroism depends on one's point of view. Whether a person grew up in an environment of prosperity or poverty, or whether they lived during a time of peace or war. Unfortunately, in some societies, a hero is someone who performs acts of terror only to benefit themselves and gain power. They have convinced the masses that their actions are virtuous. They have managed to deflect criticism and hide the true intentions. They pretend to care, but are masters at propaganda and duplicity. Heroism is more than just doing your duty and serving others in times of need. It is about demonstrating values and standards to inspire people to sustain society through times of doubt, fear, or perceived differences. It should be everyone's goal to have a moral definition of a hero. There are two different sides of being a hero. If you love watching soldiers protecting and defending your country, you might consider them a hero, no matter how they accomplish victory. In this world, there are plenty of people who love violence and are filled with hatred. They would recognize the killings of innocent civilians as an act of heroism. Others will say that's not what a hero does, and I would agree. And so, it comes down to the simple fact that a person's view of a hero is their perspective, not yours or mine. So as individuals, we must all be heroes, the kind who shine some light by displaying acts of heroism, by standing up to bigotry, hatred, and violence, whether they are directed at our loved ones or even our enemies. What some may call heroism, others may call terrorism. So real heroism is each and every one of us building a network of people who have the means to bring heroic acts to light. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph, for your inspirational words. We would now like you all to turn your attention to the screen for a short spoken word poem by poet Royalty.
Your flag, United States of America, and to your republic, for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. For you, for some, not for us, not for our people. So please stop saying we equal with your flag of red, white, and blue with one hand beat us, and to where black and blue with the other beat us, and to where none beat us, until we can't walk straight in, you put us in chains and be lucky. But for the ones of us who are also lucky, you tell us to put our hands up as some type of sick tribute to your privilege, and then you pull the trigger into our bodies laid down on your ground, pull the trigger into your clip is empty, pull the trigger until we make your evening news, and then when our children cry, we have to look our children in the eyes and tell them that they have to be cautious. That when they walk your streets, they have to do so in fear, that they have to spend the entirety of their life looking over their shoulder, because you will hunt them down, and you will bury them. Either on a prison system that aims to disenfranchise them or the dirt beneath their feet. And this is all because of that same racism that you love to say no longer exists, but we all know that that same racism is the reason that when we want to put a hood on, we resist. The reason that when we go to get these jobs, we're dismissed at the door. The reason that when we go to shop, we're watched in your stores. That racism is the reason that us saying your Pledge of Allegiance feels a lot like a root canal, or a whip's impact against our flesh, or a baton to our head, or a bullet in our back, or a tear gas at a Black Lives Matter protest. That racism is the reason that 3 women clenched their purses and huddled over the entrance of this very building. That I have to remember that the system I was born into was built to work against me. Hurts that I have to remember. Hurts that I have to remember. Hurts that I have to. Hurts that I actually have to remember that you will happily invest more money into the preservation of wildlife than you ever will into the preservation of black life. Let me ask y'all a question. When y'all turn on your TVs and witness another black body laid on your concrete, what do y'all see? Another murder? Another sad story? Another funeral? You see the aftermath? I see another child that lost their father. Another single woman trying to raise a man. Another broken home which leads to another child that grows up and suffers the same fate as their father. Which means another black woman that outlives her adolescent son. This country practices a culture that lacks equal rights for black. And we love to say that black don't crack me while your shadow or melanin like blacks. My back breaks to everybody who lay at our feet. For every memory I try to embrace within your war zones. Late nights revealed that my PTSD is on its way to the surface. And my hate in this country reminds me that I'm far from patriotic, so it's a little ironic that I pledge allegiance to your flag of the United States of America and to your republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And finally, to conclude our very last performance, we'll be welcoming once again to the stage the Rival Rams. Please enjoy.
Month. I said, what are we here for? Black History Month. I said, who are we? White gold hands. All I want to say is that they don't really care about us.
Don't worry about people saying, we know the truth.
All I want to say is that they don't really care about us.
Enough is enough of this garbage.
Geographic boundaries, bound together through our beliefs. We are like-minded individuals, sharing a common vision, pushing toward a world rid of color lines.
4,
2, 1.
Uno, two, tres, four.
Coupe, Guara, bring it from Holland to Ghana, UK, London to Nada, Angola, Caverdiana. Coupe, Guara, bring it from Congo to Zambia, Senegal up to Italia, nationwide even España.
It's okay, cause baby, you
got it, girl, you got it. Hey. You got it, girl, you got it.
You the only one I'm tryna make love to, picking and choosing. They ain't really love you, running game using. All your stupid exes, they gon' call again. Tell them that a real stepping in. Gon' let them try you, test your patience. Tell them that it's over, ain't no debating. All you need is me playing on your playlist. You ain't gotta be frustrated. I don't wanna play no games, play no games. Don't believe me, just watch. Hey, 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 oh! Wait a minute. Fill my cup.
Yo. Listen to something, I don't know, like, maybe you can call your girlfriends or call yourself. Call your own phone. And remember to Vogue.
Why don't you say so? Didn't even know.
Suzuki no be Jincheng, Jetiri no be Lukenga. You know me, another pretender. From start of the week to the weekend. Another eye for corner. Footwork like power. If you get the mic, don't me. I want to get a yacht done.
Sheep don't run with lion. Snake don't swing with monkey. I can't talk for too long. Got too much go to try on.
Give it up one more time for Rival Rare. All right, we will now have our very own Principal Dunn share a few closing remarks to end off our assembly.
Since I'm definitely not this tall. Good morning, everybody. I want to first thank our guest speakers, Mr. Murkison and Mr. Satterwhite, for taking their time out today to celebrate with us, to share their powerful words and celebrate the time with us today. I also want to thank Mr. Washington, Hanifa Maswali, and the whole African American Club for putting this together for us today. It was amazing. I want to thank Joseph Sevier for sharing his amazing speech with us. I want to thank all of the singers, dancers, and performers for displaying all the wonderful things they did today. I thought a lot about the last couple words I wanted to say to you today, and it all came back to a famous quote by Martin Luther King. "The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands in a time of challenge and controversy." The reason I chose this quote is because as a country, I feel like we're in a moment of controversy. I feel like there are some people in this country that feel like they can say things to people, hateful things, because that's what the leader of the country is modeling. I've always been proud of being a Ram. I graduated from here. You can see my house across the street. One of the most important aspects of being a Ram is the openness and the genuine regard that we have for all the members of the community, no matter what their race, their gender, their sexual orientation, or any other of their chosen identities. And I want to echo what Mr. Satterwhite had to say. We all have value. Over the last year, we've had some incidents that have challenged this, mostly through social media. I want to challenge us all to do better. I want to challenge our community to value all perspectives. I want to challenge our community to listen to each other with a sense of interest, with a sense of wonder, wanting to really hear what others' truths are, with both empathy and grace. We are a family, and the expectation is everyone here has value, everyone has the right to live their individual truth, and everyone has the right not to hear or see hateful words. I know, even though we're a great community, we can always do better. Thank you.